Special counsel Robert Mueller found no conspiracy between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russia during the 2016 election. To talk more about this and some of the other big stories from around the globe is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, has Trump now officially been exonerated? Was this, as he put it, an illegal takedown that failed?
Well, he hasn't officially been exonerated, but the facts of the case point to the fact that he is exonerated. I tweeted this yesterday. I said there's no collusion, no evidence, but no exoneration. This is obviously just more of the same. You know, the media, the left, they went after this with full confidence and they failed. They crashed, they burned. The facts tell a very different story. And now there has to be some accountability, and there won't be. When I say there has to be, I mean, that would be in an ideal world where the media can take responsibility to not have this happen under any president, whether it's left or right, not have this sensationalism be a part of our reporting, not have this, very loosey-goosey type of no source checking, no fact checking, It's awful. This is the president of the United States, regardless of what your political party is. It reflects on our country. It reflects on our national security. It reflects on how we stand among nations. You're in our northern neighbor, and you look in and you see there's a civil war going on in the United States. And I mean, how are we supposed to deal with threats like China, like the Iranian regime, like, deal with what's going on in Afghanistan or Syria when in our own country, they're so divided. And to think that there's no, sigh of relief when you know that your president didn't do anything illegal. You'd think that they would be happy, but they're upset. They're upset that they couldn't catch or frame their own president. So that's where it stands. This is the reality that we live with day in and day out. A lot of focus on this, and as a result, there is a lot of ignorance on a lot of other very important topics.
And that's biblical too. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. But I don't want to talk too badly about what's happening in the United States because we have our own issues right here in Canada with the SNC-Lavalin affair and the Norman trial coming up. Now, a story we recently had on Bridge City News was another rocket was launched from the Gaza Strip into Israel. This latest one, Lisa, badly injuring 7 people. Protests in Gaza continue, and Hamas security forces are cracking down on those protests. I mean, they're beating up demonstrators, raided homes, and detained journalists, about 1,000 people in total.
Right, and then that's what they're doing back at home, and then they're lobbing these missiles into Israel, into civilian areas. So, and there's no global condemnation of the terror group Hamas for doing all of this. This is an awful, awful reality of what goes on outside of Israel daily. I mean, now you hear the peanut gallery kind of talking about how this is in response to President Trump's announcement that the Golan Heights will be formally recognized as Israeli territory, etc. Of course, it was Israeli territory, and it was. What are we going to do? Give it to Syria that can't even keep its own land intact right now? These are excuses. This is what goes on day in and day out. Missiles being intercepted by the Iron Dome in Israel, civilian areas, schools, pizza shops, buses getting bombed, being targeted, of course, because they want that death toll to rise. And they don't care where that death toll rises, whether it's among their own people or among Israelis. You can tell by the way that they're cracking down on the protesters. I did a piece in 2014 talking about how the Palestinians are more upset with Hamas, their own leadership, than they are at the Israelis for the plight of their reality, for the way that they live day in and day out. That piece got me on the Hamas hit list. So it must have struck a chord somewhere within the Hamas hierarchy. But there's much truth to that, because you can tell by the protests going on inside Gaza right now. They may be cheering, but that is no longer something that rallies them or keeps them content. When they realize that their reality is so different from their Arab brothers and sisters who are living within Israeli territory, they realize that something is off, and it's their own leadership. So, note to those at the UN, we call it a very useless body, but when you're going to make condemnations, you should direct them towards the right people.
After vowing to strangle Iran's economy, the Trump administration is divided now over how far to squeeze Tehran. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, there's a very nuanced, degree with which we can economically squeeze Iran. What does that mean? Well, before, under the Obama administration, we had sanctions against Iran, but what I call diet sanctions. They were light sanctions, and they weren't targeting the regime in places that would paralyze its economy to the point where it couldn't stand on the global stage. Now, after President Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal in May, the sanctions that were imposed on the Iranian regime are very tactical, very strategic, and are pointed in a way that are meant to suffocate the regime in a way, but not destabilize society. Meaning the people are not going to suffer as much. Of course, they're going to suffer. People, hearing this think, wow, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Of course, under sanctions, people suffer. That's a fact. But the point is that the intention of these sanctions is to put more damage on the regime than on the people of Iran. That's A. And B, not to destabilize the global community and to uproot perhaps what we have going on with China, the talks that we have with China and the West, or any of the other 11 nations that are allowed to purchase oil from Iran. It's meant to have that stabilizing effect, so that we don't have everything go crazy and destabilize the Middle East for ourselves as well. So there is a sweet spot for sanctions against Iran, and we're trying to strike that. That's why there is this debate whether to go stronger or to hold back.
U.S.-backed forces declared victory in Syria recently, that the caliphate was defeated. But Lisa, there may be a new deadly threat emerging.
Yes. This is the threat that we've been hearing about all along. It's like that arcade game where you smack one thing that I forget what it's called, whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole, yeah.
You knock it down and the other one comes up, right? This is what ISIS is. We squeeze them out of certain areas of Iraq and Syria, which is what has been done. This is the last stronghold in Syria. But we know that they're planning and plotting. Well, we know that because of their very, very robust presence online, on the web, on the dark web for sure. I mean, that's where their main recruitment takes place in the form of videos and social media platforms. But also, where they sprout up in different areas and asking for these recruits to launch lone wolf attacks in their own neighborhoods, whether it's in Europe, which is the latest threat, is that there are going to be more of these attacks sprouting up in Europe, or in parts of the Philippines, or in northern Africa, or in the Sinai Peninsula, in Egypt. So, we try our best to rid the globe of this very cancerous influence, but we know that when they go back to work, they go back to plotting, and they will want to, come up with more ways of creating terrorism globally. One of the new faces that, or new strategies that ISIS brought about was this do-it-yourself jihadism. And because of that, they can get that one guy in Spain or in France or in the UK to stand up and launch that attack in his neighborhood, the same neighborhood that took him in or he's been living in his whole life. This is the power that ISIS has with recruitment.
The war in Syria also claimed the life of a driver for an NBC News team. A report says the explosion near the vehicle killed the driver, but the rest of the team were unharmed.
Yeah, this is, what's interesting is that for the longest time, journalists were very, very apprehensive about getting into Syria. We relied a lot on people who were on the ground there to Skype in, to make calls. I know I used to do that all the time, to find, sources on the ground, whether it was Yazidis or Assyrians or Kurds or members of the Free Syrian Army. I remember interviewing dozens of these types of people that were very eager to get on their phones and make those calls. But now with this latest stronghold being taken down and Trump making the announcement that we're withdrawing from Syria, a larger number of journalists, photojournalists, started embedding themselves with the troops to get the footage from this last battle. For some reason, this is what has been interesting, either to prove or disprove the fact that we're done in Syria. This is the interest that's being driven by the mainstream media.
Let's make our way over to Afghanistan now. Voice of America is reporting that Taliban says they've recently killed 54 Afghan forces.
Yes, more of the same, but the Taliban is really going to town on these civilian areas. This one was in a southern province. They don't flinch. They don't flinch. And to think that this is the group very similar to the Palestinians and Hamas that we just talked about, that the West is almost forced to face in a ceasefire or in any kind of deal in moving out of Afghanistan and trying to create some stability in Afghanistan.
Venezuela's opposition is fearing a major crackdown after President Nicolas Maduro threatened to arrest more people, or the diabolical pro-imperialist puppets, as he's calling them. Can't he say how much he's really hurting his people? Killing his people?
That's never been a concern for him. Had it been a concern for him, the people of Venezuela would not have suffered to the degree with which they have suffered. Hal, and I have been talking about this for over a year, I think, at this point. Maduro, at this point, when he stops humanitarian aid from reaching his people that's being sent from other places, I mean, that's life or death. That just says he just doesn't care about that death toll. And again, we've said Venezuela is a very oil-rich country. No one in that country should be suffering or wondering where their next meal will come from. And that is exactly what is going on. He started rounding up people, arresting people, most prominently Guaido, the opposition leader. His right-hand man was arrested last week, obviously a very symbolic apprehension and meant to serve a very loud and clear message to Guaido himself and anyone who supports him that they will just round them up and lock them up. Very, very unfortunate situation. And as we've said before, this is going to get much worse before it gets any better. And the people of Venezuela are stuck and really suffering in this crossfire.
Very sad with those socialist governments. China is pledging more openness in hopes of reaching a trade deal with the United States. Share with our viewers just how important it is for the two world's biggest economies to find that common ground.
Yeah, I think both sides are really itching for some sort of resolution that will benefit both, which it will. Both have so much to lose and so much to gain. So hopefully, should there be, and hopefully very soon, some sort of resolution that allows China and the U.S. to get back on a path. Both leaders have expressed that they're interested in working things through. They're getting warmer, and it seems like from the U.S. point of view that they have worked something out that hits all the notes that the U.S. is concerned with, that Trump, even as a candidate, was very concerned with, not to allow China to take advantage of this arrangement with global trade. And now, based on what you just read, Hal, it seems that China, of course, as well, wants to get things back on track.
Lisa, when I think of a march, like a pro-life march, pro-pipeline rally march, I think maybe 10, 15, 20,000 people is pretty good. 1 million people joined the Put It to the People march in London, England, calling for a new Brexit referendum. British Prime Minister Theresa May is losing control of Brexit.
Yes, a very, very stark pivot from where we were, how long ago? 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, in June, I believe, with regards to the original Brexit vote that had so many enthusiastic proponents. And now it seems like a lot of Brits, including this million and 5 million in total who have signed a petition, are very eager to exit from Brexit and to really abandon this idea, whether it's cold feet or watching what's going on in the world around them. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good because there's a reason why the UK got to the point of wanting a Brexit. And now, how does this look when they're almost going back to the EU with their tail between their legs and saying, we made a mistake. We don't want that divorce. So, Theresa May caught in a very, very, very precarious situation, her own political present and future on the line. And it seems as though that's what she's trying to defend more than anything else, but to no avail.
I'm glad you brought that up. Would this call into question her leadership, and would she be forced to resign?
I mean, it looks that way. A lot of people say, not that she would be forced to resign, but it would probably put her in that position of such a weakness, particularly because she's pushing so hard for this and cannot get any help on it. It just shows, who are her constituents at this point. And if that is what the reality is, then, she doesn't belong in office if she can't rally people towards her cause, or at least to listen to her. She's really alone on this, and I think it's going to reflect very poorly on her political future.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the way it plays out. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.